the Sundance of Christ. Yeah, what's going on, party people, the place to be? I go by the name of the BK Apologist, transmitting all the way live. New York is the city. Brooklyn is the borough. What's good? What's poppin'? It's Sunday afternoon. I hope you guys are doing well. Let me say what up to the party people in the chat real quick. We got my man Isaiah. We got CMB. We got Keith Coverton. We got C3. We got Titus 2, Bodega Lady alumni, Michelle Turner, Bodega Lady alumni. We got the incomparable, the indelible Nate 2D2 in the building. We got Tyler Lott. Yes. I'm glad you guys are here. Now, of course, usually this time is usually allotted to Mr. Phil Fox, but he's been so gracious enough to come over to my neck of the woods so that we could talk about some very interesting things. So please, Mr. Phil Fox, introduce yourself to the party people.
Nidosha Maragua. Minishi Ma'ihagadesh Hetz. Ma Bisagit. I said, hello, my friends. My name is Defeats the Enemy. It's a good day. My name is Mr. Phil Fox. My native name is Defeats the Enemy. It was given to be by my grandfather, who was a war veteran, who had the right to give names. And he gave me actually a name that is set aside for warriors, but I am not a fighting man. I never was. But he told me that the only way he was able to give it to me was because I go to war with the evil one every day. So,
wow.
Yeah. So special honor and special privilege to hold and carry that name. So yeah.
Wow.
So
that's powerful. That's such a gangster name though, because it's like, so what's your name? You're a loser. That's basically what your name is. You're the loser.
You will lose.
You will lose. You know, that's amazing, man. So and I'm glad you introduced yourself in that manner, because we're definitely going to be diving deep into, you know, your world, your culture, and how you proclaim the gospel, you know, to your people. But for those who might still don't know Mr. Phil Fox, can you just do a quick summary of who you are, who you represent? Because you actually represent quite a bit. It's not just one particular tribe. There's a few tribes that you represent. So if you could just break it down to the people.
Yeah. Well, of course, Mr. Phil Fox is my Philip Fox is my government name. And yeah, I come from the three affiliated tribes of North Dakota. We're better known as the MHA Nation, the Mandan-Hidatsa-Arikara nations, and we were put together on one reservation, mainly because we like to war with each other, and with the government and their in their wisdom, they were hoping that we would kill each other off. Wow. But we managed to strive and to grow, and but yeah, so there's a sordid history with that as well. But yeah, so the language I was speaking is Hidatsa, and we're not very well known in the United States. But our claim to fame, basically how people would know us, is through the lady Sacagawea. As Lewis and Clark were coming up through the Missouri, they fell upon one of the harshest winters, and they were in the Dakotas, and they stumbled upon our tribe, and my tribe took them in, and gave them shelter, let them stay through the spring. And Sacagawea is actually pronounced Sagagawea, which means bird woman in Hidatsa. And Sacagawea was the one who helped open up the American West, because Lewis and Clark went westward and discovered all, we wouldn't have all the American West as we know it today. Wow. If it wasn't for Lewis and Clark.
Wow. And for you to be related to that particular part of American history, that's just amazing, you know. But as these explorers came in, you know, not only did they bring in their culture and their language, they also brought in the gospel, right, to your people. And you know, we you know, me and you, we love being fair and balanced, right? We like showing both sides of the story. And as amazing as it is to receive the gospel, you know, sometimes, you know, there was something left to be desired in how it was given to be charitable, right?
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you can give us just your understanding historically of how the gospel was first introduced to your people.
Well, we have to remember that first contact was right around the Reformation, right? The Reformation started in 1517 with nailing the thesis on the door, and then the Diet of Worms with Martin Luther was, I believe, in 21, I think, 1521, and so first contact with the Native Americans and the Europeans and the gospel itself was actually the Catholic version of the gospel. So you know, people think, well, you know, the gospel came with the Mayflower. Well, that's not really true. First contact came as it, you know, in Spain, as the Spaniards came in. They came in from the south, and then and they were pushing this gospel or idea of Christianity, or under the banner of Christianity, and it was a bloody thing. I mean, it was you know, there was no form of apologetics at that time.
Right.
It was, you know, there was either you
Take it
believed it,
or-
yeah, take it or leave it. But
Right.
here's the thing, though, is that what most people think is that it was just a bloody thing. But most Native American people, they were very open to receive the gospel. They were very open to try and understand what these people were. It was the Europeans who did not even try to see from the reverse angle.
Right.
They just knew you acclimate and you become this, or you die, you know, and or you're deemed, or you're anathematized, and you are, you know, someone who is a troublemaker, simply because, you know, we're trying to provide you with, you know, with redemption, but not understanding and knowing that a lot of these people, a lot of these tribes were very, very spiritual people. And so that was a difficult thing for them to understand, is, you know, why aren't they seeing it from our perspective, or they're trying to understand or learn our culture or perspective.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've been reading, they didn't even recognize that you even had a culture to speak of, right? And that's part of the whole thing of discovery, right? Because that's why they were able to say they discovered this continent, because they did not consider the natives to be quite frank, human. You know, it's like, you guys were just these savages, so we're the humans, so therefore we're the first humans to quote unquote discover, you know. So so what I want to do, I want to show a couple of slides, couple of quotes, and even though this is history, but I also want you to comment on it, because you definitely have the inside scoop when it comes to these things. So let me share my screen here. This is really cool, man. Thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it's my pleasure, bro. It's my pleasure.
All right, so we're gonna talk about some ugly things. It'll get better as we go, I promise. But we're gonna start ugly. It says here, 1819, Congress pays missionaries to quote unquote civilize American Indians. Congress appropriates $10,000 to pay what it calls people of quote good moral character to help the U.S. eliminate Native military resistance and suppress Native traditional practices. Religious denominations are assigned to specific tribes. While encouraging the tribes to convert, the hired missionaries also urged them to adopt white styles of dress, housing, and farming. Is that accurate, or did they get it wrong?
Yeah, that's very accurate. I actually come from a home who, as far as the, trying to adapt them, um, most of the most of the Plains tribes are Catholic. Catholic was their assignment, and you'll see there's boarding schools peppered all over the breadbasket states, and then that even goes up into Canada. And and there's huge resentment within Native people my grandmother's age and older. I was raised with my grandmother, who was a product of boarding school, and it was actually, by the grace of God, my great grandfather who had he's had the foresight to see the trend of where they were going. He knew that this conversion, if you will, of not only the religion but the culture was headed towards the domination of the European style culture. He's seen the foresight, whereas there were many who had to literally pill the government would come in, or the boarding school would come in and peel the hands away from the mothers from their babies. Wow. And take them forcefully to these boarding schools and all of that. So there was tremendous distrust. And within my family, my great grandfather told all of his 9 children, listen, you're going to have to go away, but this is going to be the way that the world is going to be from now on. So if you fight it, it's going to be even that much harder. So just go the course, stay the course, get yourself educated with, according to the white man's standards, and then we'll use that. And but yes, absolutely. This was a common practice, and yeah, so that's why you'll notice that most Native Americans are Catholic. There are some Protestants, but very. I think the biggest movement was the Catholicism route.
Right, and a lot of times people will say, "Well, these atrocities happened such a long time ago." And it's like, actually, no. I mean, you have relatives, right? You've spoken to these relatives that have experienced this. So it's not thousands of years ago. You know what I mean? This is unfortunately a very recent event. 1847, wagon trains carry measles. Coyose, what tribe is this? I'm butchering the name. Do you know what tribe this is?
The Cayuse.
Is Cayuse?
Yeah, I'm not sure who that is. Yeah.
All right. Blame missionary for withholding care. Wagon trains bring measles over the Oregon Trail to Walapoo, near what is known as Walla Walla, Washington. The Presbyterian missionary Dr. Marcus Whitman comes to the area to convert local tribes, including the Coyose, but instead turns his attention to measles victims on the wagon trains. Within months, half the Coyose succumbed to the disease. Some Indian survivors who blame Whitman for withholding treatment execute him, his wife, and others at their mission. The Coyose later condemned to death 3 young men involved in the attack. So again, a missionary, who came to preach the gospel, but decided to focus more on, I guess, his mission team as opposed to the actual mission.
Yeah.
And by doing so,
Yeah, this I'm not familiar with this particular story, but there is another very similar story that is very close to me.
Okay.
I come from the Mandan, the Hidatsa, and the Arikara tribes. As we were making treaties with the United States government, the government were the first ones, and see, this is stuff that's not documented, but the United States government was the first ones to use biological warfare against the tribes. Because this is an example, but the United States government brought blankets full infested with smallpox and 90% of the Mandan people died.
Wow.
90% of their population died due to this infestation of smallpox. Now, of course, they claim, the United States government claims that they didn't know, but these are supposed to be Christian people. These are supposed to be people that are carrying the banner of Christianity.
Right.
Whether it was the government or not, these people carried the banner of Christ. And so this is another example of the distrust, the constant mistreating of these people and taking advantage of them. And this particular story is another example of that.
Right. Yeah. It's ugly. It's ugly. Let's see here. 1868, President Grant advances, quote, peace policy with tribes. President Ulysses S. Grant advances a peace policy to remove corrupt Indian agents who supervise reservations and replace them with Christian missionaries whom he deems morally superior. In reality, the peace policy rested on the belief that Americans had the right to dispossess native peoples of their lands, take away freedoms, and send them to reservations where missionaries would teach them how to farm, read, and write, wear Euro-American clothing, and embrace Christianity. If Indians refused to move to reservations, they will be forced off their homelands by soldiers. This was from Clifford Trazer, American Indian / American Presidents, A History, 2009. So,
yeah, this practice of this shows how the people group that came in had no even desire to develop an apologetic for this people group, for the Native Americans, because they're already assuming things like, we're going to teach them how to farm.
Right. It's crazy.
Yeah. But see, and here's the thing is go back. Let's go all the way back to the Mayflower. That group, when they made first contact, one of the very first, I think it was in the first 5 years, there was a very harsh winter that came through, and the Europeans already say, here's the mindset. The Europeans were upset with the Native Americans because the Native Americans had to hunker down. At that point, the Native Americans were the ones who showed the Puritans, this is how you farm, this is what we grow, right. Here's how you harvest it. All of these things, here's the process. And then this harsh winter came in, and already the entitlement mentality was already within the Europeans, because they already said, look, if you're not going to help us, you're dead to us, because we have superior technology. We can, we have, I'm pretty sure they had firearms at that time. Mm-hmm. But there's all this stuff that we're going to withhold from you, because now you're not going to give us food to help us through this winter, because the tribe was trying to make sure that and preserve their way of life and their own people. But see, so that's the first thing. And then to assume that these people groups, the Native Americans, had no form of culture. My tribe in particular, we have a very robust system as far as how we are organized within the society. We have a very complex, what's called clanship system. Mm-hmm. So when you are on this earth, you are essentially, and anyone, I carry 2 clans, and this is gonna be way deeper, but than everyone probably needs to know. But I carry 2 clans. The first clan is the clan of my mother, and essentially the clan of my mother is the one that I represent while I'm here on this earth. And my father's clan, not that they're secondary, but they have a role because they're the ones who supposedly usher you off to the next realm.
Wow.
And so while I'm on this earth, I am raised and brought up by my mother's clan. And so in that clanship, there is so anyone who is my mother's generation, all of her sisters and cousins and brother or sisters, those are all my clan mothers. So those are all my moms.
Wow.
And so and anyone who is my mother's brother or cousin who is male, those are all my clan brothers. They're the ones who take me out and take me hunting and get me into trouble and teach me how to be a rowdy young boy. And then, but on the other side of that, anyone who is my father's side, any of his male relatives, those are all my fathers, and those are my disciplinarians. So there's, that's just a small sample of how complex it is.
Right.
And this is within a quote archaic society. And so this assumption that these Indians have no clue how to be proper or again, it exposes their lack of compassion and their lack of just the simple apologetic approach to try to understand and contextualize the culture that they're speaking to. So yeah.
Right. No, that's what you just explained was a very sophisticated worldview. Very sophisticated, dealing with, as above, so below type of motif. It's like we're making sure that we got all bases covered, and we have groups that are designated for this world and the world to come, and how you're kind of like in the middle of both of those things, which is a lot of pressure on you, Mr. Phil Fox. That's a lot, man. That's a lot to have on your shoulders. But let's continue here. During the 1860s, now it's not just the Catholics or Presbyterians, right? We have here Baptist leaders colluded with federal agents to defraud Ottawas of thousands of acres of their east central Kansas land under the guise of creating an Indian university. Despite varied commentary from former students about their boarding school experiences, countless stories reveal physical and emotional abuse at these institutions.
Yes.
And this is something you just brought up when it comes to your...
Yeah. And I can attest to that. There was a huge landmark decision in Canada, I think in the past 10 years, where basically the Canadian government had to say sorry, and they paid out billions of dollars to the families of some of these victims.
Wow.
Because the first thing they would do is they would cut their hair. They would send them to this institution. They would cut their hair.
Actually, unpack that, because that sounds like that is probably more serious than we could ever imagine.
Yes.
For culture, right? Can you kind of unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. So
of the hair.
So the hair portion. Now, here's a little nugget for everybody listening. The Mohawk, right? You hear the Mohawk 80s, 80s Mohawk.
Right.
The Mohawk was actually a warrior's haircut, because what the Mohawk represented was the reason why there was the strip of hair is because one side of the head represented the earth realm and the other side of the head represented the spirit realm.
Wow.
And those warriors who were going into battle were now in that small strip of hair, and they didn't know which side they were coming in, but it also signified that they were ready to either go home or to go on to the spirit realm. That's the significance of the Mohawk.
Wow.
But the hair is for many, do you remember the Bible story of Samson and the hair was his power? So it's a similar type thing. Is most Native people, they allow their hair to grow, and it's not only a symbolism of their natural beauty, but it's also a symbol of their strength. And so many times when someone would cut their hair, if they seen that their hair was cut, the cutting of the hair was a symbol of mourning.
Wow.
And so because again, it's associated with their power, it's associated with their well-being. So if their hair was cut, then their power essentially was represented as to being gone. So the cutting of the hair was a very serious thing, and it had significant meaning as to why some person would do that. So when it's imposed onto somebody, you're taking away that power or that beauty or that strength.
Wow, that's crazy. And of course, they knew that. They knew that, and they did that on purpose to, have you become more, I guess, subservient to the new dominant culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah. And also, before we move on too quick, the part of the practice as well within the boarding schools themselves was they would not allow them to speak their own language. So there was penalty, very strict penalty, if a person would speak their native tongue to it, or if they would speak to each other. And so they would come down very hard on them if they spoke their native languages.
Right. And again, it's to, strip you from your identity, and take, because they understood if they're going to really be dominant, they couldn't just be dominant just on military might. They had to be dominant when it came to culture and language, dress, language, right? So that you could fully immerse yourself into the dominant culture. I mean, it's no different than what we see Nebuchadnezzar, right, in Babylon, taking the youngest and the brightest of Israel into his kingdom to do the same thing. Like, this has been going on since time immemorial, right? So no different here. But, everyone who was a missionary did not have such a blind response to the native. The Russian Orthodox, which is crazy. I didn't know there was a Russian Orthodox mission in America, but there was. And they understood, and they were able to contextualize the gospel. And here's a quote from their book. It says, the place where the first people come from was warm. The people lived in peace and knew no want. The first people were gifted with long life and so forth. What do we find in these ideas? This is the biblical paradise, the innocent and blessed condition of the first human beings. The longevity of the first people is the longevity of the patriarchs in the Bible. And it goes on and says, according to the, which tribe is this?
The Kodiak.
The Kodiak? All right. The Kodiak account of the creation, there's a certain wise man that is a certain all-knowing, personalized principle, a creator. At the same time, they believe there was neither night nor day, and the Bible says the same. He, the creator, began to blow on a straw. The Bible also relates a similar gradual process, which the land appearing from the depths of primal chaos. He, the creator of the world, is so immeasurably great and powerful by comparison to his creation that for him, the act of breathing alone is enough to create the earth. For there was nothing before. There are omissions and distortions, but the actual account of creation has not been lost at all. In the Bible, we read, and the Lord God formed man and breathed into him the breath of life. Lastly, it says here, the detailed moral laws about respect for one's parents and elders and the promise of long life, are they not the same as the fifth commandment of Moses? We are all born of one father and one mother. They are all brothers and sisters. This is what the scriptures tell us. So here, the Russians seem to be understanding. They took the time out to really investigate the culture of the people they were trying to evangelize. And they said, wait a minute, there's a lot of points where we actually agree with here.
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on this, sir?
It's all over, but unfortunately, this is something that Mormons, I'm sure if there's a Hebrew Israelite watching, that they would love to sink their teeth into, because there's a lot of stories within many different cultures, and as you and I were discussing before the live stream, I've had the opportunity to sing with a very good and strong drum group, and we would travel all over to these different powwows, which the powwows themselves are just celebrations,
right,
and it's an avenue for us to be able to exchange culture, and it really is, because I've met with, from Hopis from the South to other breadbasket state tribes like the Sioux and the Kiowa and Shoshone, and some of the mountain tribes like the Shoshone, and the Blackfeet, and so I mean, tribes from all over the country, and even from out east. And there's a lot of Bible stories that are very similar, and there are a lot of stories within their culture that's embedded in their culture that is very similar. And even in my own culture, one of my own creation stories is the story of Lone Man. And Lone Man is kind of a Jesus character, because we believe in first creator. He is the above all single deity. Now, yes, we do have sub god. They wouldn't be classified as gods, but they're sub deity almost.
right.
And so they this Lone Man was walking on water, and
That sounds familiar.
yeah, sounds very familiar. And then like the story that I was telling you just before the show, we have this man named Charred Body. But listen to this again. This charred body came from heaven, and he entered the earth. He transformed himself into an arrow, and he came and hence the name Charred Body. But as he entered the earth's atmosphere, he was charred. He was hit with fire, and he stuck into the ground. And then he basically sort of sacrificed himself, because he was not able to go back up into the heaven realm. So this man sacrificed himself, bruised the heel, crushed the serpent head type of almost. So he was bruised for our iniquity, basically, because he couldn't go back up to the heaven realm. So, these are some of the stories that come from my own tribe. Now, there's similar stories that are reminiscent of quote Bible stories,
Right.
all through all the many different tribes all over the United States and in parts of South America.
Right. No, I mean, there's quite a few where the main belief system is actually monotheistic. As opposed to what Ms. Candace Owens would like to believe. Hey, I'm just saying. You guys, you didn't have to be given monotheism. You had already understanding of what that was, right? Yeah. And according to even the Russians, when they took time out to really understand, they saw a lot of points of contact where they can actually, it makes it much easier now to contextualize the gospel when you understand the other person's point of view, right? And like what you said earlier, the other settlers could care less about knowing that. And then they wonder why it was so hard for them to convert people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I mean, so it might be a little early, but I mean, some rubber meets the road stuff. How does this apply to us today?
Right.
Those of us in our, even right now with with BK and some of the folks in the chat, Servant of Christ and CMB, you'll see us work very hard to try and not just pass off the other arguments or the other side's arguments.
Right.
BK, ancient Near East, he understands and has studied, put in time to try and understand the arguments that they're coming from. And it takes a lot of preparation, and it's not easy. It's not easy.
Right.
It's the easiest thing to do is just to write off their arguments, don't care, and just beat them down with the gospel. But what does that really do, right? Because what is, 1 Peter 3:15? We have to provide a defense, but we have to do it with compassion. Well,
Absolutely.
what's part of compassion? Part of compassion is not just defrauding the other side and writing them off and not caring about them, but caring enough about them to be able to understand where they're coming from, so that way you can have better argumentation as to what they're really saying. So, no.
Absolutely. And that was a great segue to talk about, missionaries that cared about the people that they were trying to evangelize. We have Miss Narcissa Whitman, and she wrote a bunch of letters about her experiences living among the natives and evangelizing them. So it says here, as European settlers headed west in the early 1800s, Native Americans across the United States experienced unimaginable evils. Their lands were taken by force, and many American Indians were forced to forfeit their culture and beliefs to adopt the cultural practices of whites. Though there are many negative connotations among stories of Christian missionaries and Native Americans, there is evidence that some white settlers deeply cared for the Indians they were ministering to and had their best interests at heart. On April 11th, 1838, Christian missionary Narcissa Priestess Whitman, who lived in Oregon Territory and worked with the Wellitupo tribe, wrote a letter showing her different attitude towards Native Americans. Whitman wrote of a more understanding and non-forceful approach to reaching the Native Americans with Christianity. She believed that the Native American children were very capable of succeeding in school, but also flourishing in life. Her talk of, okay, help me with that word.
It sounds from, yeah, let's go with that.
I'm doing my Spanish thing on it. Teloquique also shows that some of the Indians within the tribe also cared for the missionaries. Teloquique had given Whitman's infant daughter an Indian name, showing his endearment to her family. Had he been hostile towards her or her fellow Christian missionaries, he would certainly not have Indian names to white children or work willingly with them to farm the land. Now, let me stop there. Now, giving names is a very, very big thing, I'm assuming, in your culture.
Yeah. The name you're given. See, some tribes, not all. My tribe in particular, we give two names. So there's a juvenile name that you're given, and then once you come of age, then you get your adult name. And so I actually skipped all that, and I was just given my adult name by my grandfather. Some of it is because my family isn't, quote, very traditional. So we have some of the practices. The family as a whole observes some of the practices, but not all.
Right.
And so, but yeah, the name that you are given is something that isn't just thought about, like how we, what's a good name for our new one coming. Mm-hmm. There is thought put into it, but there's an added layer to it where people pray about this. Actually, they go to someone and they offer them tobacco, which is a sacred object for us. And once you give someone tobacco, that person cannot refuse you, because that's how serious that. So that means, so I could just ask you, hey, BK, can I come on your channel? But if I said BK, and I had some tobacco with me,
right,
BK couldn't say no. But but yeah, so yeah, this is a very serious thing. So that person would pray and pray and pray, and often they would fast and pray for a number of days before they came up with this name. And so yeah, there was a lot that
right. So for them to give this white woman giving her children this name, that was a major compliment, right?
Huge honor. Yeah.
Huge honor. So all right, but let's continue. Missionaries then also had a reputation for forcing Native Americans to abandon their native languages and adopt English. This is certainly not true in all cases, because Whitman talks of having books printed in the Indians' native tongue so that they can better understand. She and her husband were also working hard to learn the Indian language so that they could better communicate with them. Their efforts appeared to be welcome because she stated, the most interesting exercise in the Sabbath school in which we assemble, the youth and children at 5 o'clock p.m., the aged ones appear to be as much interested as the children. We have been teaching them the 10 Commandments, with which they were very much pleased. So as you see, there's an effort on her part, her and her husband's part, to really engage the culture,
Mm-hmm.
And to actually respect it. It's like, well, not only are we going to learn your language, we're also going to, write these books in your language so to better understand where we're coming from when it comes to the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
But to do that, you would have to have a deep care for the people that you're reaching out to.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And that's, unfortunately, many short-term missions, modern day short-term missions, have the opposite of this perspective. They go, they do their service projects, they play basketball with the locals, and then they're gone. But actually it was through missionaries that I was saved. So wow. I know that this works, that missionaries, and I have a very big heart for missionaries, but the reason why the missionaries worked on my reservation and in my community in particular was because they had this philosophy. They believed in relational ministry, not just blow in, blow up, and blow out. We've seen that, and I've seen that. And so the vision of the gentleman and his wife, as they led missions, they wanted consistency. So they would even bring the same group multiple times. So, hey, I remember you from last year, and building on these relationships.
Wow.
And so it was that model that I would strive, because when I was in high school, these missionaries I was a little bit younger than high school, maybe early middle school age. And then they would come, and then it was my freshman summer is when I came to Christ, 99. And then so I went from just being this little boy on the reservation to now I was engaged, and I became sort of the liaison between these. So growing that relationship is key. And that's not only key, I mean, because you see in apologetics in general, if you can build a relationship with people, it's easier. And what's that corny quote? People don't know how much you care, or how they won't listen, or whatever, how much you care until you care how much you listen, or something like that.
Right.
Anyway, but yeah. So I mean, that is key to any kind of ministry, is your heart has to be in it in order for it to be effective. Because just waving the banner of Christ and then plowing somebody with some Bible verses, that doesn't work. So go ahead.
Right. So, but moving on to this contextualization, right? There's good and bad when it comes to that, because it says here, over time, Native Americans across the Great Plains incorporated Christian traditions into their tribal identities. Missionaries erred, however, in their estimation that they could replace tribal traditions with Christianity. On the Omaha Reservation in Nebraska, prominent La Flores family members claimed elements of Presbyterian tradition that did not clash with their tribal identities. Some contemporary Native Americans chose to blend tribal traditions with Christianity by praying to Jesus in a sweat lodge. Let me stop there. What exactly is a sweat lodge?
So a sweat lodge is it's a small little dome-like structure. And it's usually constructed with willow trees, like twigs, but a little larger than twigs. But the shell is made of that, and then they used to cover them with buffalo hide, but now they use canvas and stuff like that. So basically, what there is in the middle of that is a small pit, and it's like a sauna. So they have these usually young boys who are called the fire keepers. And what they do is they conduct, basically it's a prayer ceremony, and you can fit, I mean, in the small dome, you wouldn't think you can fit maybe 3 people in there, but you can fit like 15 people in.
Wow.
And there's a usually a medicine man, but a holy person would conduct the ceremony, and basically they would have several what they call rounds of prayer. And so depending on how, what you need and how much prayers are needed to be said, they bring in fresh rocks, and they put different herbs. So like cedar is one, and sage, and then they'll throw them on the fire, and the smoke will come up, and then they'll start dousing water on it and creating a very hot atmosphere. And this is for you to sort of cleanse. And there's a self-sacrifice aspect of it as well, because you're suffering because it's so hot. And also there can be a euphoric side to it as well, because you're so hot, and now you're, starting to get woozy and maybe have some kind of vision or something like that. So that's a sweat lodge.
Wow. And these guys have kind of used that now for Christ, which is very interesting. It says here, and the Great Spirit in churches of a Native American see no need for religious exclusivity. They distinctly practice tribal, Christian, and Native American church traditions throughout their lives. Many contemporary tribal members still essentially ignore Christian traditions. So, with that being said, so we saw some of the history.
Yeah.
We saw some of the good and some of the bad of the gospel being introduced to your people. And we fast forward to you, Mr. Phil Fox. Which is interesting. I didn't know it was actual missionaries that actually, brought you the gospel. So now you are now commissioned to not only to the whole world, but to your people, convey the gospel to them. What has that been like for you since you've been a believer?
It's I was telling BK just before the program, even inside of me, leading up to this, there was still a sense of like I was going to betray my people, because this is ingrained in us, that it's either white man's religion or your religion. And
what's the word that they call you?
An apple.
Why they call you Apple?
They call me an apple because I'm red on the outside but white on the inside.
That's crazy.
And it's a derogatory term, right. For someone who is native, who looks native but acts white. And so this is not only just because of the religious aspect, but it's anyone. And see, unfortunately, within the reservations and within native communities, people have a hard time seeing others succeed. So there's the crab in the bucket mentality. And so even if I wasn't a Christian, but because I am, quote, successful, I live off the reservation, I am articulate, I'm able to speak in a variety of different contexts. They see me as, oh, look at him, he's acting white, and so because I'm not using the common reservation vernacular and talking all Riz, what are you talking about, huh? This guy.
Wow.
Yeah, so I could talk it. I can hang with the boys back home,
right.
But when I am articulating and trying to present the gospel and do these things, or if I'm in a business meeting, I can't be talking. One of our common phrases is like, if someone gets a kick out of something, they'll go, "Hey," or "Did you hear that? Hey, I'm just messing with you, man. Hey." But yeah, so I can't be using those types of things in all contexts.
Right.
So, but as far as trying to keep this thing from eating at your heart, because there is this very difficult thing. And there was a book that I forget the title of the book that you sent me, but it explained it perfectly. It said that a Native American person, and I know that, most people have to deal with self-correcting their own culture, because we all have our own cultures that we have to deal with, whether that's our family culture,
Right.
or just our neighborhood culture. So I know that we're not special in any way, but for us, it feels like we have our feet in a different canoe. One foot's in the white man canoe, and the other one is in the Indian canoe.
Oh, and by the way, the word canoe is an Indian word. It's not an English word. Just want to throw it out there.
Just
anyway, continue.
and so we're on this water, but people, sort of think of it as, oh, we're just gently row your boat gently downstream. No, we're in these rapids of ideas, where sometimes they go extremely far apart and then they come crashing together, and it's hard for us to truly marry the two concepts. And so we get ostracized from both sides. And unfortunately, that has been in the current culture, in the current world as we know it now. As we've been battling some of these race things going on just recently, unfortunately, our Euro-ethnic brothers and sisters sort of see themselves as the gatekeepers of Christianity, right? And so they're the ones who get to tell us, the people of color, what Christian looks like. And as you can see throughout this history, they have been doing that since they hit the coast. And so they still view themselves as the gatekeepers. So here's what you should look like. Here's how worship should look. And so, unfortunately, like with your last slide, it's been very difficult, because a lot of these tribal people, they start to synchronize religion and doing stuff like having church in the sweat lodge. Now, is that necessary? Now, sure, you could use the building, but the ceremony itself, it's a self-sacrificial type ceremony. Is there a need to sacrifice yourself? And so the title of this particular video is the Sundance of Christ. The Sundance is one of the biggest ceremonies, one of the most well-known ceremonies of all Native American cultures. And the Sundance itself was banned by the U.S. government because of the self-mutilation aspect of it. And what they do is they pierce themselves in the chest, and they tether themselves to a pole in the middle of a dancing arena, and they pull until these pegs that are made out of bone, until these pegs break or the skin breaks. And these are the men dancers, and the women dance. The women who participate, they go and they give flesh offerings.
Wow.
And so what I get to tell them is, look, you are trying to sacrifice, and they dance like this for days, for 4 days. They dance, they go without food, very little water. And they are doing this to appease Creator, because they don't necessarily believe in sin, but Creator has done favors for the community, for the tribe, for the people in general. And so since Creator has done this, there needs to be some kind of atonement for that, or payment. And so what I get to tell them is, look, that payment has been made.
Wow.
And I'll take the Acts 17 approach. Let me tell you about that unknown God. Let me tell you about who Lone Man is.
Wow.
Let me tell you about who Charred Body is, who that would represent, and take it and learn the culture, understand the culture enough to know that this is who they're talking about, and create an avenue to preach Christ.
Right.
And so it sounded like you had another question teed up.
No, bro.
Oh.
You was going in.
Yeah.
Going in.
So as we, as we were trying to look at this idea and trying to contextualize it, that is part of the hardship, is because Native American people were postmodern before the word postmodern was coined. Their thinking is innately syncretistic from the offset, because the tribes were trading culture within each other. Yes, they were warring with each other, but the tribes were trading customs. They were trading ceremonies for goods. They were trading spiritual ceremonies for goods. So they would always be, there was a conglomerate of different religious practices. And we as the Hidatsa, we didn't traditionally do the Sundance. That was actually something that was given to us. That ceremony was given to us. It was traded for. And so in the same thing, and this is even documented even as modern as in the mid 1800s, the Kiowa people traded with the Pawnee, who traded with the Arikara people, who are one of my tribes, and they were given this specific type of Sundance. So there was this idea. So that's why we have so many of these things. People are trying to, the Catholic Church is one of the main culprits of syncretism when it comes to the Native Americans, and trying to quote contextualize the gospel.
Right.
But you'll see priests wearing beaded things, and even part of their ceremony, they allow even some of our death rituals and stuff. They'll still allow those things to take place, because they don't want to quote, upset the native order.
Wow.
And so it's extremely difficult,
right,
to try and communicate with them, because if you come to someone who's very traditional, they'll say to you, well, that's good. I'm glad that you're that way. I'm glad that you like Jesus, but that's your way. And the way we do things, that's our way. So if you like this white man's way, that's good. I'm glad for you. I'm glad you like that. And that's the path that Creator has put you on. But the path that I'm on is the path that Creator has put me on. So it's very difficult to get through that shell.
Right.
Because and these are common arguments that are used across the board, not just within the Native American context. I mean, you can look at all other world religions and within their traditionalism, and they'll do the same thing. They'll say the same stuff.
I mean, there's a fine line we have to walk when it comes to the mission field, right? Because we want to contextualize, but we can't syncretize. You know what I mean? It's like we want to use what's redeemable of anyone's culture, but not everything in someone's culture is redeemable. But when you convey the gospel in this manner with the Sundance Festival, it doesn't sound like you're taking away culture when you say it in that way, right? If anything, you're providing like almost added information that you didn't have. It's like, this is what you thought, but let me show you the actuality of it, right? It's no different than people during the New Testament times when they first heard the gospel. It wasn't so much a new thing as opposed to a fulfillment of something they already believed in.
Yeah.
Right. So you're kind of taking that same approach. It's like there's certain things that you already believe in that actually is part of the gospel. So there's already connections, and you're just using those connections to completely fulfill the actual gospel that partly they kind of have inklings of already. Right.
Yeah.
So
it's pointing out and using the spirituality, because what did Paul say when he first came up to these men on Mars Hill? Ah, I see that you're already spiritual people. Let me tell you about this. Oh, I see that you had this statue of this unknown God. Let me tell you who that is. So that approach, because what does that do? First of all, that's not me coming at you.
Right.
That's me coming with commonality. And so being able to do that and say, look, you don't have to do these things because this sacrifice has been made, helps us open the doors. Well, what do you mean the sacrifice has been made? What do you mean I don't have to, sweat and cry and be, take all of this zapped out of me because I'm trying to atone for something that's not mine to atone for in the first place.
Right.
So these doors are opened and it disarms that person. But again, like you were saying, it's very difficult because there are portions of it that are not redeemable. There's portions of any culture that are just flat out, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but are flat out demonic. Because I have been to ceremonies where they have blackened out the windows and we sat on the floor, and there was probably 150 people in this large building. They would black it out. In the middle of this ceremony was a medicine man, and they would tie him up as if they were getting him ready to be put on the scaffold, and where they would rest the body to keep it away from all the animals and stuff. And all of his awards, all of his personal belongings would all be around this altar, and he would be tied up. Even his fingers would be tied up behind him, put behind him, and he would be laid belly on the floor, and he would conduct this ceremony, lights out. And I have heard things and seen things that are spiritual things. I have, because this is a room that is either this is the biggest ruse or special effects or any of that stuff. And I don't see the sophistication, but I have heard things like the fan that they would use made out of an eagle's wing. I've heard that flying around the room. I have heard voices yelling at the person right next to me, and then that same voice all the way across the room in the blink of an eye yelling, and then these strips of light that would fly across, and they would summon these things. They would summon these they call them grandfathers, they call them helpers, and they would say, well, Phil, these are what you would call angels. But see, the difference is we don't summon angels.
Right.
We don't summon people that, the Bible is very specific as to calling upon dead people. Because see, these things are that what they say is, I was at a ceremony one time and I was a Christian. I was trying to build a bridge. So please don't judge me on that. But I was trying to build a bridge, and I prayerfully went into this ceremony, and it was announced that the grandfather of the crazy horse was in the ceremony with us.
Wow.
And you can hear these little voices. They sound like munchkin voices. This isn't secondary information. This is primary. I witnessed this with my own eyes and ears. And I have seen this stuff. And I have secondary information where my grandmother would tell me that the elders would meet, and they would have these bundles of things, different sacred objects, and they would unroll them, and the elders would bring out their medicine bundles, and they would see all of a sudden this 100-year-old eagle talon come to life and start to pulsate. And my grandmother remembers seeing that, because they would lift up the bottom of the tent, and being little nosy kids, and she said she was scarred for life because she's seen these things.
Wow.
So the stuff that we're dealing with is very real.
Absolutely.
It's not because Ephesians chapter 6 says it. We're not fighting against flesh and blood.
Right.
See,
Powers and principalities. Right?
Exactly. And that's the thing, is that people don't realize, but a lot of religions throughout the world, although they are old, they are very modernized.
Mm-hmm.
Native American religion is one of the most archaic and oldest religions, but it has been purified by the fact that it's so close that a lot of these things we're being taught have been preserved somehow. And so they're not very far from what they were doing eons ago.
Right.
And so that's something to keep in perspective, is that the power of these things that they're doing is very, very, very real. And
I mean, you don't convince me. I'm Puerto Rican, so the Santeria and all that. Like, yeah, it's real, bro.
Yeah,
it is so real. Absolutely. But man, Mr. Phil Fox, this was so enlightening and educating. And also, I hope everyone prays for Mr. Phil Fox, because he's on the front lines. There's not a lot. Well, I don't want to assume that there's not a lot, but I'm assuming that there's not a lot of people who are really invested the way you are when it comes to, because this is your people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So of course you're gonna feel a certain resonance for your own people. I mean, that's just natural,
Yeah.
And I know that it's challenging.
It is.
Right?
It is, and it's lonely, because see, the thing is unfortunately, if someone does convert, they usually convert to the Word of Faith movement. Because and if you look at it, it's a natural
Progression.
natural progression, because everything that's within the Native American culture is look, feel, see. I'll believe it when I see it. So of course that's going to translate over to, well, if I can believe it, if I can see it, if I can speak it,
name it and claim it. Right.
Name it and claim it. Yeah. And so don't you dare speak of that, because if you say it, you're going to put it out in the universe, and that's unbiblical as well. Because there's nowhere in the Bible that says that you can speak something into existence. Only God has the power to speak things into existence.
Right.
There is nothing that we can do or nothing that we can say that's going to change the mind of God. We come to God in prayer and do all these things, but that's for us to align ourselves, not to change God's mind, because God is sovereign over all this whole entire thing. So, we need to be careful. And that's the thing and so that's also another part that makes it so difficult, because any of my brothers and sisters in Christ, and I believe they are redeemed, but we disagree on some of the theological things. And that's the other hard part, is that there are not very many brothers and sisters who are Native American who are very developed theologically. So it's hard to come by another brother to say, hey, let's talk about why you believe that, and for them to be able to articulate that.
Right.
Well, I just believe it because, well, I know the blood of Christ, and okay, but why do you believe that?
Right.
Right. So it's difficult to have any of these conversations, and then automatically a lot of them will default back to their syncretism, or they'll default back to the postmodern type thinking.
Right.
So,
wow. I mean, but God put you in that position because He knows that you're the man for the job. God has equipped you to be in this particular position. As scary as that sounds, right? But God has placed you there to be a minister of reconciliation for your people. And we pray that, you'll be able to replicate Mr. Phil Fox and other people, So hopefully they won't be Dolphin fans. But outside of that, outside
big up.
Dollar tour. Anyway, but But yeah, bro, we really hope that you continue to contend for the faith, and you don't allow, the real feelings that you have of being alone and feeling like you're by yourself, because you're not by yourself.
Oh yeah.
Right? You're part of God's kingdom, right? So you're not by yourself, but there are times where you're gonna feel that.
Yeah.
And we just pray that you don't allow that to disrupt the mission that God has called you for.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, Mr. Phil Fox, this was amazing. This was great. I think the chat really enjoyed it as well. Any final words or things that we can expect from you in the near future? Well, actually, where can people contact you? Where can they reach you?
Well, they can get me on Facebook, all your major socials, Instagram, Twitter, all at Mr. Phil Fox. And then, of course, at my YouTube, I think Dinu put it up there. Cool. But yeah, so you can get it. But I mean, I'm an accessible dude, so I usually get back to people, but I'm usually on Facebook most of the time. Facebook, you'll be able to, you can my daughter just got home, so my dog's gonna go crazy.
But the early warning system, the dog.
Yeah, they're really, yeah. But yeah, so Facebook for sure, reach out there. Yeah, my YouTube. Thanks a lot, Nate. Thanks a lot, Dinu. And then or you can visit the website, www.dropsofhopeministries.com. You can go there and check out some of the blog stuff. I haven't blogged in a while, but I did some blog stuff. And then also there's a link to my YouTube, link to my Facebook there too as well.
Cool. And what can we expect from you? Are you going to be on next Sunday?
Yeah, next Sunday, Lord willing, I'll be on with Gen Z Apologetics for our second round. We were hijacked by questions our first round, and young man was a little bit salty at not being able to share his slides. So I said, "All right, we'll bring you on, man, and you can finish out your slides." So he's going to do that, and then on the 13th of September, I have Michelle Turner on. Nice. Going over the woman's role in the church.
Ooh.
And the biblical view of the woman's role. So fellas, watch out. Put time to get into your word.
Right.
But yeah.
Cool, man. There's a lot of similarities with Santeria, Voodoo, Africans, Ifa, and Native American spiritualism. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's that's why I was happy when Facebook for sure message me or whatever. I'm like I said, I'm really accessible. I try to get back to people the same day if I can.
Right.
But yeah, so there's a lot of this that is going to be crossover, and as I was getting engulfed in urban apologetics, I was seeing a lot of the same similarities. And so I have to thank you, BK, and the entire UA community, because it's helped provided me with better answers, more answers, and things that I could sort of revamp and use in my context. And Amen. So yeah, I have to say thank you for your guys' faithfulness as well.
Bro. Iron sharpens iron, bro. I mean, we're all here to help each other so that we can help everyone else, So, and with that being said, it's Mr. Phil Fox, BK Apologist signing off. Catch you soon. Peace.